Have you ever downloaded a pure PPF that everyone swore was ultra realistic, but when you tried it yourself, it looked nothing like the screenshots? Yeah, we've all been there. Truth is, there's no such thing as a bad or good PPF. It all comes down to personal taste. What looks cinematic to one person might look straight up dull to another. What if I told you, maybe it's time to stop chasing other people's realism and start crafting your own instead? It's simpler than you think. Just you, pure, and a bit of curiosity. Though, fair warning, it might involve a few late nights and a new addiction to pure settings that'll replace your addiction to feet. So in this video, I'm not handing out the ultimate preset of the gods or claiming I've cracked the visual code. I'm just sharing my way of chasing that photorealistic look through Pure, the tool most of us use these days, so you can see how flexible it really is once you start shaping it to match your own sense of realism. Visual realism is completely subjective. It's like judging a date based on their profile picture versus seeing them in the harsh light of morning. Both are real, especially when you spend too much time in Content Manager. And I'll just share the pure settings that make your poor decisions look great on camera. Just a heads up, I'm not a pure expert or anything. I'm just a guy who experiments. I just click stuff until it somehow works and my FPS stops crying. All right, awesome fellas, still with me, Faye. If you think what you see since the start is a heavily altered footage with video editing and post-processing renders other than the in-game PPF settings, well, you're wrong. This is just my regular custom PPF, which I know I haven't released yet. Anyway, you can actually do something similar or even better with any pure PPF, aiming for the same purpose as this one, capturing those sweet photogenic screenshots. And from there, we can use that realistic screenshot mindset as the foundation for your own realistic setup. You only need to start with a few main things first, then fine-tune the rest later until you get the look you want. That's the mindset I always start with. Treat every frame like a photograph first, then worry about how it feels in motion later. I'm going to demonstrate by creating a new PPF. Before we do anything else, set the time to daytime with a low sun angle, like early morning or late afternoon. The idea here is to make sure you can clearly see how the light plays in the darker shadowed areas of the car and the surroundings. Open the post-processing filter app, right-click on it, and choose Create New. Everything might look darker at first. Don't panic. Open the Pure PP app, go to the Script tab, change the exposure settings to Fixed, and raise the target slider to brighten things up until it looks right. Now, for a dramatic or cinematic style of screenshots, you'd be surprised that there are only a few simple things to do it. First, open your PPF editor window, and on the Color tab, activate color grading and change to any preset that you like. Adjust the intensity until it feels right and save it. That's it for now. As you can see, we already have a dramatic look on the scene. Now open the Photo Mode app and let's find a good angle to prepare for the shot. You might want to adjust the focus to add a slight dramatic vibe by holding Control and clicking on any area you want the camera to focus on, then blur the rest by triggering depth of field at the same time. Refine the blur further by adjusting the Focus At and F number sliders. Once you're happy with the settings, click Preview Shot before saving and let it process your nice screenshot CSP settings. And voila! Now you've got a new wallpaper that'll finally replace your girlfriend's photo, if that's even a thing in your life right now. Let's head back to the PPF editor and open the Tonemapping tab, where you'll see the HDR option checked and a list of tone mapping presets. Basically, tone mapping is the process that translates how bright and dark areas of an image are displayed. It's what keeps your screen from looking like either a flashlight or a cave. In Assetto Corsa, tone mapping sets the overall tone of the visuals, with each preset having its own way of balancing brightness, contrast, glare intensity, cloud appearance, and more. It's one of the main elements that defines how your final PPF looks and feels. All right, now that we've nailed the first step toward a photorealistic look, it's time to talk about lights and shadows. Pure gives you plenty of ways to tweak both, including the options in the Color tab inside the PPF editor. But I usually don't mess with those too much. Instead, we'll jump straight into the Pure Config app. You know, the one with an army of sliders just waiting to confuse you. For now, let's focus on the ones that control how much light actually shows up on screen. Two things to keep in mind here that'll affect the result. the time of day, and the active weather preset. We've got most of the good stuff we need inside the Light tab. Starting off with the Light Daylight Multiplier. That one's basically in charge of how bright your world gets during the day. Then there's the Light Sun Level, which tweaks how intense the sun itself shines. Right below that, you'll find the Ambient Light section, a bunch of settings that control how the light from the sun, clouds, and even the sky dome bounce around and light up everything in the scene. And don't skip the Ambient Light V2 dropdown. That's where you'll find separate controls for each of those light sources and a few extra ones you might not expect. Further down, there's Distant Ambient Light and Directional Ambient Light. Pretty self-explanatory, really. They handle how light behaves over distance and direction, helping the overall lighting feel more natural and less like someone just turned on a giant studio lamp. So yeah, this whole area is your playground for fine-tuning how the lighting behaves, from soft and cinematic to bright enough to make your virtual driver squint. Now let's move on to the shadows, the part that gives depth and mood to your scene. This section depends heavily on how you set up your lights earlier, so as long as you didn't go wild with those sliders, you're in a good place to fine-tune the darker tones now. Start with Shadow Presence. This one controls how strong the overall shadows are. If you lower it, the whole scene gets darker. I usually drop it from the max value to around 60%, which gives a nice balanced tone, especially during cloudy weather when the sunlight's filtered through the clouds. Next, let's talk about VAO, short for Vertex Array Objects. Basically, the system that enhances shadow detail in specific areas, like the track surface and the car itself, rather than affecting the entire scene. Setting the VAO amount near the max, around 1.7 or so, tends to give that sweet spot of realistic contrast without making things look overcooked. Then you've got the VAO Track Exponent, which deepens the shadows specifically on the track, and VAO Dynamic Exponent, which affects how your car darkens when it's under those shadowy spots. These sliders are basically the foreplay of lighting. Subtle moves, small adjustments, and before you know it, the whole scene just feels right. Now that we've got the basics of lights and shadows sorted, our first foundation toward building a custom pure PPF, I've got a few more tips to share. Because your masterpiece isn't just for show. You might want it for screenshots, cinematic clips, or just to make your casual apps look like an art film. But before you go full Spielberg, here's something worth keeping in mind. Your active weather preset plays a big role in how light and shadow balance out. The cloudier the sky, the softer and more blurred your shadows become. Meanwhile, a bright sunny day throws crisp, solid shadows like it's trying to prove a point. If you're after a clean, balanced look for screenshots or photos, try the Overcast preset. It gives this naturally even lighting across the whole scene, relying mostly on ambient light from the clouds and sky instead of the sun itself. The reflections on the car also look smoother and less harsh. And before I forget, little performance tip for those who love watching replays. If you notice a slight dip in frame rate, pop open the PPF editor, scroll down to the depth of field section, and switch the aperture shape to any of the hexagon options. For some reason, the hexagon shapes are way easier on performance. Plus, they still look good, unless you're into counting your frames like they're calories. Alright, so that's a solid start to understanding Pure and shaping your own realistic look. But this is just the warm-up. There's still a ton under the hood, and we'll get to all that in part 2. We're all still learning here, experimenting, breaking things, fixing them again, and pretending it was part of the plan all along. So yeah, take your time, tweak your sliders, and remember, the real danger isn't crashing your car, it's realizing you've spent hours tuning the ambient light instead of racing, or, picking up your kid from school. I'm Faye signing off, see you in the next part. And as always, stay awesome.